The wind, a restless phantom, whispered secrets through the skeletal branches of ancient oaks long before I saw Blackwood Manor itself. It carried the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang, like distant rain, or the subtle perfume of old iron. My small car, a sturdy but unremarkable companion, crunched over the gravel drive, the sound startlingly loud in the vast gathering twilight. Then, there it was. Blackwood Manor. Not just a house, but a sprawling, formidable presence, built of dark stone that seemed to absorb the last vestiges of the day's light. Turrets rose like ancient guardians against a bruised sky, and countless leaded windows, each a dark, unblinking eye, stared out over the manicured wilderness of its grounds. It was magnificent, intimidating, and utterly silent. A place of stories, undoubtedly. And I, Ilara Vance, archivist and curator of forgotten histories, was here to coax them from its dusty corners. I had accepted the commission with a mixture of professional eagerness and private trepidation. Julian Thorne, the current and somewhat reclusive heir, had a formidable reputation even in the hushed circles of academia. Brilliant, exacting, and notoriously private. My task was to catalogue and preserve his family's immense, unorganized library. A collection rumored to contain everything from medieval illuminated manuscripts to obscure first editions of romantic poetry. A dream job in theory. A heavy oak door, studded with black iron, swung open before I could even raise my hand to the knocker. A woman of advanced years, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, stood framed in the amber glow of the hall. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, missed nothing. "Miss Vance, I presume?" Her voice was crisp, like starched linen. "I am Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. Mr. Thorne is expecting you." "Yes, Mrs. Gable." "Thank you." My voice felt thin, swallowed by the cavernous hall. It smelled of beeswax, old wood, and a faint, indefinable scent that felt like history itself. She led me through a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors, past tapestries depicting forgotten hunts and portraits, whose subjects seemed to follow me with their painted eyes. My sensible boots made no sound on the thick Persian carpets. Every breath I took felt amplified, every rustle of my jacket a transgression. We arrived at a set of towering double doors. Mrs. Gable gave a single firm knock. A voice, low and resonant, answered from within. "Enter." She pushed the doors open, revealing a room that was both a sanctuary and a challenge. The library. It was vast, reaching up 2 stories, lined floor to ceiling with books. Books of every size, every color, every age. A fireplace, grand enough to roast an ox, crackled cheerily, casting dancing shadows on the spines. A large ornate desk dominated the center, piled high with yet more books, maps, and scattered papers. And behind it, standing by the mantelpiece, was Julian Thorne. He was exactly as I had pictured him, yet entirely unlike. Taller than I'd imagined, with a lean, almost ascetic build that belied a formidable strength. His dark hair, perpetually on the verge of disarray, framed a face of stark angles and planes. But it was his eyes that truly held me, the color of deep moss, intense and piercing, set beneath heavy brows. They met mine across the expanse of the room, and for a long moment, the world outside the library ceased to exist. It was a gaze that didn't just look, but seemed to see into the quietest corners of my being. "Miss Vance." His voice, closer now, was even deeper than I'd anticipated, carrying a subtle, gravelly texture that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a voice that whispered, even when spoken at a normal volume. "Mr. Thorne." I managed, extending a hand that felt suddenly clumsy. He took it, his grip firm and warm, a startling contrast to the cool reserve in his eyes. His fingers were long, elegant, and bore the faint roughness of someone accustomed to handling things with care and purpose. The touch was brief, but it left a lingering warmth. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor. I trust Mrs. Gable has settled you in." "Not yet, sir. We just arrived at the library." He nodded, withdrawing his hand. "My apologies. Mrs. Gable will show you to your quarters. We can discuss the scope of the project tomorrow morning. I imagine you'll want to acclimate." His dismissal was polite but firm. He turned back to the fire, a silhouette against the flames, and I felt a faint flush rise to my cheeks. He was not rude, but he was certainly not welcoming in the traditional sense. Just efficient. Mrs. Gable, ever the silent shadow, led me upstairs to a suite of rooms overlooking the manicured grounds. My bedroom was large and airy, with a four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet and a window seat that promised hours of contemplation. A fire had already been laid in the hearth, ready to be lit. The adjoining sitting room contained a small desk, a comfortable armchair, and a selection of books, a thoughtful touch. As I unpacked, the silence of the manor pressed in. It wasn't an oppressive silence, but a living, breathing one, punctuated by the occasional creak of old timbers, the distant whisper of the wind, and the faint, rhythmic tick of a grandfather clock somewhere downstairs. I felt utterly alone yet strangely watched. Dinner was served in a small, elegant dining room. Mrs. Gable brought a tray laden with a delicate mushroom tart, a crisp salad, and a glass of surprisingly robust red wine. I ate in silence, the clinking of my fork against porcelain echoing in the room. The solitude, initially a comfort, began to feel like an anticipation. The next morning the world outside my window was transformed. A fine, silvery mist clung to the ancient trees, blurring their sharp edges and giving the landscape an ethereal, dreamlike quality. After a light breakfast brought by Mrs. Gable, I made my way back to the library. Julian Thorne was already there, seated at the large desk, poring over a leather-bound volume. He looked up as I entered, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Good morning, Miss Vance. Slept well?" "Very well, thank you, Mr. Thorne. The quiet is profound." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Indeed. It's one of the few places left where one can hear oneself think. Come, let's discuss your work." He rose and gestured to a large oak table in the center of the room, distinct from his desk. It was already cleared, ready for my tools and materials. He laid out a meticulously detailed plan, outlining the different sections of the library, the estimated volumes, and his specific concerns regarding preservation. He spoke with a quiet authority, his voice a low thrum that resonated in the vast space. It was the kind of voice that made you lean in, not because it was soft, but because every word felt weighted with meaning. "My primary concern," he explained, gesturing to a particularly dusty, towering section, "is the Thorne family archives. Letters, journals, ledgers. They are, shall we say, less organized than the general collection. And quite fragile." I nodded, absorbing every detail. "Understood. I'll begin with a general assessment, then prioritize the most vulnerable sections." For the next few hours, I worked in a quiet corner of the library, sorting through a pile of what Julian called miscellany. Discarded pamphlets, old maps, forgotten invitations. He remained at his desk, occasionally rising to retrieve a book from a high shelf, his movements fluid and graceful, like a predator in its natural habitat. The scent of old paper and leather mingled with the faint woodsy aroma of his presence, creating a subtle, intoxicating perfume that filled the air around me. His quiet presence was both a challenge and a comfort. I was acutely aware of him, the rustle of his clothes, the soft turning of pages, the occasional, almost imperceptible sigh. It made my senses sharpen, every movement I made more deliberate. I found myself stealing glances at him, watching the way the light caught the planes of his face, the intensity of his focus. He was a man carved from granite and shadow, yet with an underlying current of something profoundly alive. Days bled into weeks. A rhythm established itself. Mornings in the library, the air thick with the scent of history and the silent hum of our shared work. Julian would often be there when I arrived, and usually still there when I left in the late afternoon. We rarely spoke at length, our conversations primarily limited to the task at hand, the provenance of a particular text, the best method for mending a torn page, the curious marginalia in an 18th century volume. Yet within these professional exchanges, something else began to unfurl. A subtle dance of gazes, a lingering pause in a shared moment. One afternoon, I was struggling to reach a book on a particularly high shelf, perched precariously on a rolling ladder. My fingers brushed uselessly against the spine. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. "Allow me." Julian's voice was a low murmur directly behind me, so close I could feel the warmth of his body radiating against my back. His arm reached past me, long and strong, his sleeve brushing my shoulder. The scent of him, crisp linen, old paper, and something uniquely his, enveloped me. My breath hitched. I froze, acutely aware of the proximity, the slight sway of the ladder, the solid wall of his chest behind me. He retrieved the book with effortless ease, his fingers brushing mine as he passed it down. My skin tingled where he touched me. "Thank you," I managed, my voice a little breathless. I descended the ladder, my heart thrumming against my ribs. He merely nodded, his eyes, those deep, intense eyes, holding mine for a beat too long before he turned back to his desk. That evening, as I sat by the fire in my room, trying to read, his presence lingered. The memory of his arm reaching past me, the brush of his sleeve, the scent of him, it was etched into my senses. I found myself replaying the moment, dissecting every micro-sensation. It was absurd, of course. A simple act of assistance. But it had felt like so much more. The weather outside turned colder, mirroring the increasing intensity of my internal landscape. Frost painted intricate patterns on the windows each morning, and the wind outside became a constant, mournful whisper. The manor, with its thick walls and roaring fires, felt like a warm, ancient heart beating against the encroaching chill. One evening, after a particularly productive day in the archives, I found myself drawn to the drawing room downstairs. I rarely ventured beyond the library, my bedroom and the dining room, but a faint melody had drifted up the stairs. Someone was playing the piano. I paused at the doorway, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob. The music was a Chopin nocturne, haunting and beautiful, its notes weaving a spell in the dimly lit room. Julian Thorne sat at the grand piano, his head bowed, his long fingers dancing across the keys with a grace that astonished me. His face, illuminated by the firelight and the faint glow from a single lamp, was softened, almost vulnerable. The intensity in his eyes was still there, but it was directed inward, channeled into the music. He played with a deep passion, each note infused with a melancholy beauty. I stood there, unseen, unwilling to break the spell. It was a side of him I hadn't anticipated, this capacity for such profound expression. It humanized him, made him less of the formidable scholar and more of a complex, feeling man. The whispers of the music filled the room, touching something deep within me. When the last note faded, hanging in the air like a breath held too long, he remained still for a moment, his head bowed. Then he slowly lifted his hands from the keys and turned, his gaze sweeping the room. He saw me. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked. He offered a small, almost shy smile, a rare, breathtaking sight. "Miss Vance, I didn't hear you come in." "I apologize, Mr. Thorne. I heard the music and I couldn't help but stop. It was beautiful." He rose, his movements unhurried. A habit from my youth, one of the few indulgences I still permit myself. He walked over to the armchair by the fire, gesturing for me to take the sofa opposite. "You enjoy classical music?" "Very much. Especially Chopin. There's a particular yearning in his compositions." He settled into the armchair, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Yearning, yes, a profound word for a profound emotion." He paused and looked at me, his gaze holding mine. "Do you yearn, Miss Vance?" The question caught me off guard. It was personal, intimate, and entirely unexpected. The fire crackled, the wind outside whispered against the panes, and the only sound was the beating of my own heart. I felt a blush creep up my neck. "I suppose everyone does, Mr. Thorne," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "For something, or someone." He watched me, a faint, unreadable expression on his face. "Indeed." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. The manor can be isolating. Do you find it so? Sometimes, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. It's a magnificent place, full of history and beauty, but yes, it's quiet, profoundly quiet. A quiet that allows one to hear the whispers of the past, he mused, his eyes on the fire again. And perhaps the whispers of one's own heart. His words hung in the air, charged with a meaning that went beyond the literal. I felt a sudden, inexplicable connection to him, a shared understanding of the solitude that permeated this grand old house. The air between us thrummed with an unspoken energy, a delicate thread of romantic tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying. We talked for a long time that evening, not about books or archives, but about life, about art, about the quiet ache of existence. He spoke of his family's history, of the weight of expectation, of the beauty and burden of inheriting such a legacy. I spoke of my own path, my love for uncovering forgotten stories, my quiet dreams. The hours slipped by, unnoticed. The fire dwindled to embers, casting long shifting shadows. The room grew cooler, but the warmth between us seemed to intensify. I felt a dizzying sense of intimacy, as if we were the only two people left in the world, sharing secrets under the watchful eyes of ancient portraits. At last he rose. "It's late, Miss Vance. I've kept you up." "Not at all, Mr. Thorne. I enjoyed our conversation." He walked me to the foot of the grand staircase, the silence of the manor pressing in once more, but this time, it felt different. It was no longer empty, but filled with the echoes of our shared words, the lingering warmth of our connection. He stopped at the bottom step, and I turned to face him. The dim light from the hall lamp cast his face in shadow, highlighting the sharp planes of his cheekbones, the intensity of his eyes. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was feather-light, barely there, but it sent a shockwave through me. My skin tingled, my breath caught in my throat. His fingers lingered for a fraction of a second, warm and electric, before withdrawing. "Good night, Alara," he whispered, his voice a low, husky murmur that seemed to caress my name. It was the first time he had used my first name. "Good night, Julian," I replied, my voice barely a breath. I ascended the stairs, my legs feeling strangely weak, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Each step was a whisper against the carpet. When I reached my room, I leaned against the closed door, my eyes shut, my hand pressed to my chest. The gentle brush of his fingers, the intimate whisper of my name, the yearning in his eyes, it all coalesced into a potent, intoxicating sensation. The quiet of Blackwood Manor no longer felt like solitude. It felt like an invitation. "Ayud?" And in the silence of my room, I could still hear the faint, insistent whisper of his voice, echoing in the deepest chambers of my heart. A whisper that promised something thrilling, something dangerous, something profoundly beautiful. The whisper clung to me, a phantom caress against my skin long after he had gone. It was a melody played on the strings of my own heart, reverberating through the quiet chambers of Blackwood Manor. I stood in the center of my room, the fire in the hearth a mere flickering echo of the blaze that had ignited within me. My hands, still tingling from the ghost of his touch, pressed against my chest, as if to contain the frantic rhythm of my pulse. Sleep, I knew, would be a distant shore tonight. The air in the room, usually heavy with the scent of old wood and lavender, now carried the faint, intoxicating musk of his presence, a scent that clung to the fabric of my dress, to my very hair, and to the deepest recesses of my memory. It was wild, yet refined, like ancient forests touched by a sophisticated urban charm. I found myself lifting a wrist to my nose, inhaling deeply. A private, almost shameful act of devotion to the lingering essence of him. The silence of the manor, once a balm, now felt amplified, a vast canvas against which every beat of my heart, every breath I drew, seemed to echo with magnified intensity. I walked to the window, pushing aside the heavy velvet drapes. Outside, the night was a rich tapestry of deep indigo and charcoal, punctuated by the skeletal silhouettes of the ancient trees that gave Blackwood its name. A sliver of moon, sharp and delicate, hung in the sky, casting long dancing shadows across the overgrown grounds. The wind, a mournful whisper through the eaves, seemed to carry secrets, promises, and the faint, persistent thrum of my own awakened senses. My mind replayed the scene in the library, every gesture, every word, every shift in his gaze. The way his eyes had darkened, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the sheer undeniable force of his presence. He was a man carved from shadow and light, a paradox that both intrigued and unnerved me. And I, who had always prided myself on my composure, my unwavering rationality, found myself utterly undone by him. I shed my dress, letting it pool around my feet like a forgotten dream. The cool night air kissed my bared skin, a stark contrast to the heat that still bloomed beneath my collarbones. I moved to the washstand, pouring cool water into the basin. Splashing it over my face and neck, I hoped to quell the restless energy that coursed through my veins, but it was futile. Every nerve ending felt alive, humming with an unfamiliar, exquisite tension. Donning a silk nightgown, a garment usually reserved for the solace of sleep, I found myself pacing. The fabric, soft and cool against my skin, offered little comfort against the tempest brewing within. I felt a yearning, sharp and insistent, for something I couldn't quite name, something I hadn't known I lacked until his arrival. It was a hunger, not just of the body, but of the soul. A profound desire for connection, for understanding, for the dangerous beauty he promised. The hours stretched, endless and luminous. I tried to read, to distract myself with the weighty prose of a forgotten classic. But the words blurred, coalescing into the image of his face, the sound of his voice. My body felt heavy and light all at once, a strange dichotomy of exhaustion and electric energy. Finally, unable to bear the confines of my room any longer, I slipped out into the silent corridor. The old house creaked and groaned around me, a symphony of ancient wood and settling stone. Moonlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, painting silver pathways on the polished floorboards. I walked without conscious direction, my bare feet silent on the cool wood. The air grew colder as I descended the grand staircase, the vast space swallowing the warmth of my breath. Each step was a deliberate rebellion against the quiet decorum of Blackwood, a silent pursuit of the impossible. I found myself drawn as if by an invisible thread, back to the library. The door stood ajar, a sliver of darkness inviting me in. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed it open further. The room was bathed in shadows, the scent of old leather and pipe tobacco still faintly clinging to the air. His scent. I imagined him here, lost in thought, perhaps even now. The thought sent a fresh wave of heat through me. Then I saw it. A faint glow from the far corner near the massive fireplace. A single lamp had been left burning, casting a pool of warm amber light over a worn armchair. And in that armchair, silhouetted against the light, he sat. He wasn't reading. His head was tilted back, resting against the velvet upholstery, eyes closed. The fire, now reduced to glowing embers, cast a ruddy gleam on the sharp planes of his face, accentuating the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble that shadowed his chin. He looked vulnerable, untouched by the formidable intensity he usually exuded. My breath hitched in my throat. I hesitated, poised on the threshold between shadow and light, between propriety and an overwhelming urge to simply be near him. My silk nightgown felt like a beacon in the darkness, a flag of surrender. As if sensing my presence, his eyes fluttered open. They were dark, fathomless pools in the dim light, and they met mine with an unnerving directness. A slow smile, a ghost of one, touched his lips. "I thought you might come," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within me. He didn't move, didn't beckon, but the invitation in his gaze was palpable. A silent plea that transcended words. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me into the room, towards the firelight, towards him. I couldn't sleep, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. The honesty felt raw, exposed. He nodded, his gaze unwavering as I approached. Nor I. He gestured to the footstool by the armchair. Join me. I sank onto the velvet stool, the fabric cool against my legs, the warmth of the dying embers a welcome embrace. Our knees were almost touching, the intimacy of the proximity breathtaking. I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the subtle, earthy scent of him, now mingled with the faint aroma of the library. It was a potent elixir. What keeps you awake? I asked, my voice still hushed, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile magic of the moment. His eyes, dark as midnight, searched mine. Many things, he said, a faint shadow passing across his features. The weight of the past, the uncertainty of the future, and tonight. He paused, his gaze dropping to my lips, then back to my eyes. Tonight, the unsettling, beautiful disruption of an unexpected presence. My breath caught. Disruption? I echoed, a tremor in my voice. Yes, a disruption of my carefully constructed solitude, a disruption of my expectations. And he leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near inaudible murmur. A disruption of my heart. My pulse quickened, a frantic drum against my ribs. The honesty of his words, delivered with such quiet intensity, disarmed me completely. I found myself reaching out, my hand hovering, then resting tentatively on his knee. The fabric of his trousers was warm beneath my palm, and I felt the solid strength of his leg. A shiver, not of cold but of pure sensation, ran through me. He didn't flinch, didn't move. His gaze intensified, locking with mine, a silent conversation passing between us. My fingers, emboldened, traced the line of his thigh, a slow, deliberate movement that felt both rebellious and inevitable. The air between us crackled, thick with unspoken desires. You feel it too, don't you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, I breathed, my heart aching with the truth of it. I feel everything. He shifted, turning slightly to face me more fully, his hand rising to meet mine. His fingers, long and strong, closed around mine, sending a jolt of exquisite warmth through my arm. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my knuckles. His lips were warm and firm, and the delicate brush of his stubble against my skin sent a wave of delicious shivers down my spine. This place, he began, his thumb stroking the back of my hand, Blackwood Manor. It has a way of revealing truths, doesn't it? Stripping away the facades we wear. Perhaps, I murmured, my eyes fixed on his mouth, remembering the almost kiss in the library earlier. Or perhaps it merely amplifies what's already there. He smiled then, a genuine, breathtaking smile that softened the lines of his face and lit up his dark eyes. Perhaps. And what, pray tell, has Blackwood amplified in you? I hesitated, searching for the words to articulate the storm of emotions swirling within me. A yearning, I finally whispered, for something profound, something real, a connection I hadn't realized I was missing. My gaze faltered, dropping to our clasped hands. And a desire I find both terrifying and exhilarating. He lifted my chin with a gentle finger, compelling my eyes to meet his once more. Terrifying and exhilarating, he repeated, his voice a low caress. Yes, that is precisely how it feels. His thumb brushed lightly over my lower lip, a feather-light touch that sent sparks dancing through my veins. Tell me, he urged, his voice barely audible. What about this desire frightens you? Its intensity, I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. Its unexpectedness. I've always been contained, controlled. This feels like an unraveling. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. An unraveling can be a beautiful thing, he whispered, his eyes dark with a potent mixture of tenderness and passion. Like a tightly wound bud finally bursting into bloom. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. His proximity was intoxicating, overwhelming. I could feel the heat of his body, the subtle tension in his muscles, the magnetic pull that drew me closer still. My gaze was fixed on his lips, now so close, so inviting. "And what about it excites you?" he pressed. His voice a soft, insistent murmur, his thumb still tracing the curve of my lip. "Everything," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. "The unknown, the promise, the way you make me feel alive." I closed my eyes for a fleeting moment, savoring the sensation of his touch, the scent of him filling my senses. When I opened them again, his face was inches from mine. His eyes, dark and intense, held a myriad of emotions. Desire, tenderness, a hint of something deeper, something almost wistful. He lowered his head slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, but I didn't. I leaned into him, my hand still resting on his knee, feeling the tremor that ran through him as our lips finally met. It was a soft, hesitant kiss at first, a gentle exploration, as if we were both testing the waters of this profound connection. His lips were warm and yielding, tasting of old brandy and something uniquely him. I responded instinctively, my own lips parting slightly, inviting him deeper. He accepted the unspoken invitation, his kiss growing more confident, more urgent. A soft moan escaped my throat as his free hand moved from my chin to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, drawing me closer still. The world outside the library faded, becoming a distant hum. There was only the warmth of his mouth on mine, the intoxicating taste of him, the soft rasp of his stubble against my skin, the exquisite pressure of his hand. My hand, which had been resting on his knee, now slid up his thigh, seeking purchase, my fingers curling into the strong muscle beneath the fabric. He groaned softly into the kiss, a sound that vibrated through me, igniting a new, deeper fire in my belly. The kiss deepened further, becoming a passionate, consuming act of surrender and desire. His tongue traced the seam of my lips, then ventured inside, exploring the soft, warm cavern of my mouth. I met him with equal fervor, our tongues dancing a slow, sensual waltz, each movement a silent promise, a breathless question. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of discovery, of a hunger that had lain dormant for too long and now demanded to be fed. My body thrummed with a delicious ache, a yearning that radiated from the very core of my being. My fingers tightened on his thigh, pulling myself closer still, until there was barely an inch of space left between our bodies. I could feel the hard plane of his chest against mine, the steady beat of his heart mirroring my own frantic rhythm. When we finally broke apart, it was with a soft gasp, our lips still tingling, our breath coming in ragged gasps. Our eyes, heavy-lidded and dilated, met once more, reflecting the passion that had just passed between us. He ran his thumb gently over my swollen lower lip, his gaze lingering there. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are utterly beautiful." My cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the embers in the fireplace. His words, delivered with such raw sincerity, were like a balm to my soul and a catalyst to my burgeoning desire. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long while. He shifted in the armchair, pulling me gently until I was no longer on the footstool, but cradled against his side, my head resting on his shoulder. His arm wrapped around me, holding me close, protective and possessive, all at once. The silk of my nightgown twisted around my legs, and I felt the warmth of his strong body against mine, a comforting yet exhilarating presence. The silence returned, but it was a different silence now, one imbued with the lingering echoes of our kiss, the unspoken promises, the profound intimacy we had just shared. I closed my eyes, inhaling his scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. "Tell me," I whispered, my voice muffled against his shirt, "what is it about Blackwood that drew you here?" He sighed, a long, thoughtful sound. "Sanctuary," he said, his voice soft, almost melancholic. "A place to escape, to heal." He paused, his fingers gently stroking my hair. "And perhaps, to find something I wasn't even looking for." His words hung in the air, weighted with unspoken stories, with a past that remained shrouded in mystery. I felt a surge of protectiveness, an urge to unravel his secrets, to understand the pain that lurked behind the intensity in his eyes. "And you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "What brought you to this forgotten corner of the world?" I hesitated, wondering how much to reveal. "A similar need, perhaps," I admitted. "A need for quiet. For reflection? To escape expectations." I felt his arm tighten around me, a silent understanding passing between us. We sat there for a long time, held in the amber glow of the lamp and the dying fire, wrapped in each other's presence. The world outside, with its demands and its disappointments, seemed impossibly distant. Here, in the heart of Blackwood Manor, in the quiet intimacy of the library, we were simply two souls drawn together by an irresistible force, navigating the thrilling, dangerous, and profoundly beautiful landscape of burgeoning desire. His hand moved from my hair, tracing a path down my arm, his fingers lightly caressing the silk of my nightgown, sending shivers across my skin. He found my hand, interlacing our fingers once more, his thumb stroking the back of my palm in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The simple touch was more potent than any grand gesture, a silent communication of warmth and connection. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, mingled with an electric anticipation. This man, with his shadowed past and his compelling presence, had awakened something within me that I hadn't known existed. And as the first hint of dawn began to paint the sky a pale grey beyond the library windows, I knew that this night, and the connection we had forged, was only the beginning. The whisper of his voice, echoing in my heart, had promised something thrilling, something dangerous, something profoundly beautiful. And I was ready to embrace it all. The first hint of dawn, a pale grey smear against the library windows, was not a signal for an ending, but a new beginning. My heart, a wild bird trapped in my ribs, beat a frantic rhythm against the quiet hush of the ancient room, echoing the whisper of Silas' voice in my soul. I was ready to embrace it all. He stood before me, still as a statue carved from shadow and moonlight. His eyes, those pools of dark, potent secrets, fixed on mine. The air between us, once thick with unspoken questions, now thrummed with a vibrant, undeniable answer. A silent understanding passed between us, profound and exhilarating. The world outside, slowly waking, seemed distant, irrelevant. Only this moment, only him, only us. "The sun rises," he murmured, his voice a low counterpoint to the growing light, and with it, a new day. He reached out, his hand moving with a slow, deliberate grace, and traced the line of my jaw with a feather-light touch. A shiver, electric and thrilling, coursed through me, leaving a trail of warmth in its wake. My breath hitched, caught somewhere between my throat and my pounding chest. His thumb brushed over my lower lip, a silent invitation, a promise of exquisite sensation. My lips parted involuntarily, a soft gasp escaping. "Silas," I breathed, the sound barely audible, a fragile thread of my own name against the vastness of the moment. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth, a fleeting glimpse of a vulnerability that made him even more captivating. "You are more beautiful than the dawn," he said, his gaze deepening, pulling me into the endless depths of his eyes. "And more intoxicating than any vintage in this house." My cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through me, not of embarrassment, but of a profound, dizzying pleasure. To be seen by him, truly seen, was a revelation. He lowered his hand, though the ghost of his touch lingered, burning on my skin. "Come," he said, his voice a gentle command. "The night has offered its secrets. Let us see what the morning holds." He turned, a fluid movement, and walked towards the grand doors of the library, leaving me to gather myself, to catch up with the sheer magnitude of the emotions swirling within me. I watched him go, his broad shoulders, the dark cascade of his hair, the aura of strength and quiet mystery that clung to him like a second skin. This was not a man one simply walked away from. This was a force of nature, and I, willingly, was caught in his current. I followed, my steps lighter than they had any right to be after a sleepless night. The vast, echoing hallway was still steeped in shadow, but the first rays of sunlight now slanted through the high windows, painting stripes of gold across the polished marble floor. The scent of old wood, beeswax, and the lingering perfume of ancient books gave way to something fresher, the crisp, cool air of early morning filtering in from somewhere unseen. Silas led me towards the back of the house, away from the formal reception rooms. We passed a grand staircase, its balustrade intricately carved, then a series of closed doors, each hinting at untold stories within. The silence of the house was profound, a testament to its age and the solitary life Silas seemed to lead. Yet, it was not an oppressive silence. Rather, it felt protective, intimate. He pushed open a heavy, unadorned wooden door, revealing a surprisingly modern, yet still tastefully appointed, kitchen. Stainless steel gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, contrasting with the rustic warmth of a large oak island and terracotta tiles. A window, wide and spanning an entire wall, looked out onto a sprawling garden, still shrouded in the cool mist of pre-dawn, where ancient trees stood like sentinels. "Coffee?" he asked, turning to me, a faint, inquiring lift of his brow. "Please," I managed, my voice a little husky. My throat felt dry, my senses overwhelmed by the sudden shift in atmosphere and the sheer domesticity of the scene. Here, in this space, he seemed less lord of the manor, and more a man. A man who might make coffee on a quiet morning. The thought was strangely compelling. He moved with an easy grace, his long fingers already reaching for a sleek coffee maker. The rich aroma of brewing coffee soon filled the air, mingling with a faint, earthy scent from the garden outside. I leaned against the cool marble countertop, watching him, absorbing every detail. The way his sleeves were rolled up, revealing the strong forearms beneath, the slight furrow in his brow, as he concentrated, the quiet efficiency of his movements. There was an elegance even in the simplicity of him making coffee. He poured 2 mugs, thick ceramic vessels that fit perfectly in the hand, and offered one to me. Our fingers brushed as I took it, and the contact sent another jolt through me, a quiet echo of the night's intensity. The warmth of the mug was grounding, comforting, a small anchor in the swirling sea of my emotions. "Thank you," I said, taking a slow sip. The coffee was rich, dark, and perfectly brewed, a welcome warmth spreading through my chest. He leaned back against the counter opposite me, mirroring my posture, his gaze never leaving mine. The silence that fell between us was not awkward, but filled with a delicate tension, a silent conversation more potent than words. It spoke of shared moments, of burgeoning desire, of a fragile new connection taking root. "You look rested," he observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. I laughed, a soft, self-deprecating sound. "I think electrified might be a more accurate description." His smile returned, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. "Perhaps I feel a similar current." He took a long, deliberate sip of his coffee, his eyes still locked on mine over the rim of the mug. "This house, it has been quiet for a long time. Your presence is a welcome disturbance." "A disturbance?" I teased, a playful note entering my voice. "A beautiful disruption," he corrected, his gaze unwavering. "Like a sudden, brilliant storm raking over a still landscape." My heart fluttered. His words, so poetic, so profound, spoke directly to the wildness he had awakened within me. "And are you accustomed to such storms, Silas?" He lowered his mug, his expression thoughtful, a shadow passing briefly over his eyes. "My life has known its share of tempests, but none quite like this." His gaze swept over me, lingering on my hair, my lips, before returning to my eyes. "You carry a storm within you, I think, a vibrant, passionate energy." The intensity of his observation made me feel both exposed and exhilarated. He saw past the surface, into the very core of me. "And you, Silas?" I countered, finding my voice. "You are the calm eye of the storm, drawing everything into your center." He chuckled, a low rumbling sound that resonated deep within me. Perhaps we are two halves of the same weather system then. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, the world outside slowly brightening. The mist in the garden began to lift, revealing manicured lawns, intricate flower beds, and ancient stone pathways winding through groves of trees. It was a magnificent estate, vast and beautiful, yet imbued with a sense of quiet solitude. "Would you like to explore?" Silas offered, pushing away from the counter. "The gardens are particularly lovely at this hour." "I'd love to," I replied, setting my empty mug down. The thought of walking beside him, under the nascent morning sun, was irresistible. He led me out of the kitchen, through a small, unassuming door that opened directly onto a gravel path. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient trees, whispering secrets. The garden was even more breathtaking up close. Roses, still heavy with dew, bowed their heads in silent homage to the morning. Lavender bushes released their calming fragrance, and honeysuckle climbed ancient stone walls, its delicate blooms a cascade of white and pale yellow. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, side by side, our shoulders occasionally brushing. Each contact was a spark, a silent reminder of the magnetic pull between us. "This place is incredible, Silas," I finally said, my voice hushed with awe. "It feels timeless." "It has seen many generations," he replied, his gaze sweeping over the landscape with a proprietary yet almost melancholic air. "And many stories." He paused by a gnarled oak, its branches spreading wide like welcoming arms. "My family has held this land for centuries, though I am, for now, the last of my line." A pang of sympathy, mixed with a deeper curiosity, stirred within me. The shadowed past he alluded to last night seemed to encompass this solitude, this legacy he carried. "It must be a heavy responsibility," I ventured gently. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "It is a weight, yes, but also a profound connection to something enduring, a root in a world that often feels rootless." He looked out across the sprawling grounds. "I spent much of my youth away from here, only returned in recent years, to settle debts of a kind, to reclaim what was lost." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. The mystery was part of his allure, a puzzle I found myself increasingly eager to solve, piece by tantalizing piece. His life, so different from mine, drew me in with an irresistible force. We walked deeper into the garden, past a hidden fountain, where water burbled softly, a soothing melody against the morning quiet. He pointed out ancient espaliered fruit trees, a carefully tended herb garden, and a secluded stone bench tucked away beneath a canopy of wisteria. "This is my favorite spot," he said, gesturing towards the bench. "When the wisteria is in bloom, it's like sitting inside a perfumed cloud." We sat down, the stone cool beneath us. The morning sun, now higher in the sky, dappled through the leaves, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow over us. The air was warmer here, still fresh but losing its chill. He turned to me, his arm resting along the back of the bench, his fingers dangerously close to my hair. "Last night," he began, his voice low, intimate, "you spoke of finding a different kind of story. Is this what you imagined?" I met his gaze, my heart quickening. "I don't think I could have imagined either, Silas, not truly. It's more than I ever knew to hope for." His eyes, dark and fathomless, searched mine, as if seeking to read the very depths of my soul. He leaned closer, the subtle scent of him, wood smoke, old paper, and something uniquely masculine, filling my senses, intoxicating me. My breath hitched in my throat, my body humming with anticipation. "Hope is a powerful thing," he murmured, his voice a silken thread, his gaze dropping to my lips. "And desires, even more so." My lips parted, a silent invitation. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, thick and potent. His hand, which had been resting on the back of the bench, slowly, deliberately, moved. His fingers brushed against my hair, gently pushing a stray strand away from my face. The touch was light, tentative, yet it sent a tremor through me, a wave of heat washing over my skin. He leaned in further, his breath warm against my cheek, his eyes still holding mine, asking a question without words. My own eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite proximity, the unbearable slowness of his approach. Every nerve ending in my body was alive, tingling, yearning for his touch. Then, finally, his lips met mine. It wasn't a tentative exploration, but a deep, confident claim. Soft at first, then deepening, demanding, igniting a fire that had been smoldering within me since the moment I first saw him. His mouth was warm, firm, utterly captivating. I responded instantly, my own lips parting further, inviting him in. He tasted of coffee and something uniquely masculine and addictive. My hands, which had been resting clenched in my lap, instinctively lifted, finding purchase on his shoulders, clinging to the soft fabric of his shirt. I felt the taut strength of his muscles beneath my fingertips, a silent testament to his power. The kiss deepened, becoming more fervent, more urgent. His hand moved from my hair, cupping the back of my neck, his thumb caressing the sensitive skin behind my ear. He tilted my head back slightly, allowing for a more profound connection, a more complete surrender. My senses swam, overwhelmed by the intoxicating rush of sensation. The world outside the wisteria-covered bench faded away, leaving only the two of us, locked in a passionate embrace, consumed by the moment. A soft moan escaped my throat, a sound I barely recognized as my own, as his tongue traced the seam of my lips, seeking entrance. I granted it willingly, eagerly, meeting his explorations with my own. It was a dance of desire, a silent, eloquent conversation spoken through touch and taste and breath. His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, my body pressed against the hard planes of his. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the solid strength of his chest against mine, the frantic beat of his heart mirroring my own. The kiss grew wilder, hungrier, a tempest of emotion unleashed. I felt myself melting into him, dissolving in the exquisite pleasure of his presence. When he finally pulled away, it was with a reluctant groan, his forehead resting against mine, his breath ragged. My own breath came in short, shaky gasps, my lips tingling, my body still humming with the aftershocks of his kiss. "Sweet God," he breathed, his voice thick with raw emotion. "You taste like starlight and forbidden dreams." My eyes fluttered open, meeting his. His pupils were dilated, dark and intense, reflecting the same fervent desire that still coursed through my veins. His lips were swollen, reddened from our shared passion, making him look even more devastatingly handsome. "Silas," I whispered, the name a plea, a question, a confession. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes still dark with desire, but a flicker of something else there too, a profound tenderness, a protective warmth. His thumb stroked my cheekbone, a gentle, reassuring gesture. "We should return to the house," he said, his voice a little strained, "before the staff begins their rounds for the day, and before I lose all semblance of control." The words, though a gentle push away, were laced with a promise, a confirmation of the intensity of his own desire. I nodded, though every fiber of my being wanted to remain exactly where I was, wrapped in his arms, lost in the intoxicating spell he wove. He helped me up from the bench, his hand lingering at my waist as we walked back through the now fully awakened garden. The sun was higher, brighter, painting the world in vibrant hues. Birds sang cheerfully from the trees, a stark contrast to the quiet ferocity of our shared moment. The walk back to the house was filled with a different kind of tension now, a delicious anticipation, a conscious awareness of the lingering heat between us. We entered the house through a different door, one leading into a magnificent conservatory, filled with exotic plants and the scent of rich earth. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "I have some matters to attend to this morning," he said, turning to me, his hand still lightly at my back. "Some business that cannot wait." He looked regretful, his gaze filled with an unspoken apology. But I would very much like for you to stay, to share lunch with me, and dinner." My heart soared. "I'd like that very much, Silas," I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips. The thought of us spending more time with him, of delving deeper into the mystery that was Silas Blackwood, filled me with an exhilarating sense of purpose. "Excellent," he said, his own smile rare and potent, appearing. He led me to a comfortable sitting room, filled with plush velvet sofas and walls adorned with exquisite paintings. "Make yourself comfortable. There are books, music, whatever you desire. Please feel free to explore the house within reason." A playful glint entered his eyes. "Though I trust you will not stumble upon any hidden passages to forgotten dungeons." I laughed, feeling lighter, more vibrant than I had in years. "I shall endeavor to avoid such dangers, though a little adventure might not be entirely unwelcome." He lingered for a moment, his gaze holding mine, a silent promise passing between us. Then, with a reluctant sigh, he turned to leave. "I will return as soon as I can. Do not stray too far." As he walked away, his presence still resonating in the room, I found myself touching my lips, still tingling from his kiss. The echoes of his voice, the feel of his touch, the scent of him, it all lingered, a powerful testament to the connection we had forged. I wandered through the sitting room, my mind still replaying the moments we had shared. The library, the kitchen, the garden bench, the conservatory. Each place now held a special memory, imbued with the magic of his presence. The house, once silent and imposing, now felt alive, filled with the promise of more. I picked up a book from a nearby table, a collection of poetry. But my eyes blurred over the words. My thoughts were consumed by Silas. Who was he, really? What were these debts he had to settle, this shadowed past that defined him? And what did he truly see in me, this woman who had stumbled into his reclusive world? The questions tantalized me, pulling me deeper into his orbit. I felt an undeniable pull, a fierce curiosity mingled with a profound sense of destiny. This was not a fleeting encounter, it was the genesis of something monumental. And as the morning sun warmed the room, filling it with a soft, golden light, I knew that my journey with Silas Blackwood had only just begun. The day stretched before me, pregnant with possibility, and I was ready to embrace every thrilling, dangerous, and profoundly beautiful moment it promised. He stirred beside me, a low rumble emanating from his chest that vibrated through the mattress and into my bones. My eyes, which had been tracing the patterns of light on the ceiling, drifted to his face. The morning sun, now a bolder gold, sculpted the planes of his jaw, illuminated the dark fringe of his lashes, and softened the usual intensity of his gaze. He opened his eyes slowly, a deep, fathomless blue that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe, and met mine. A slow smile, both predatory and profoundly tender, spread across his lips. "Good morning, my dear," he murmured, his voice a warm, husky caress. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," I admitted, the truth surprising even me. His presence, despite its novelty, felt like a homecoming. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of my jaw, then threading into my hair, pulling me gently closer, until our foreheads touched. The scent of him, rich earth, old books, and something uniquely masculine, enveloped me, a potent elixir that calmed and electrified me simultaneously. "I feel it too," he whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "This connection." His thumb brushed over my lower lip, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver down my spine. Something momentous indeed. We lay like that for a long time, simply breathing each other in, the unspoken language of our bodies speaking volumes. Eventually he broke the spell, rising with a grace that belied his powerful build. "Breakfast, I think," he announced, pulling a silk robe from a nearby hook and shrugging into it. "Unless you have other ideas?" His eyes gleamed with a playful challenge. My cheeks warmed, but I met his gaze squarely. "Breakfast sounds civilized." He chuckled, a rich, resonant sound. "Civilized for now, but I promise, my dear, our journey will be anything but." The days that followed were a blur of intoxicating discovery. Silas Blackwood was a man of captivating contradictions. He could be intensely focused, lost in his work in the cavernous book-lined study that was his sanctuary. He'd emerge, dark hair disheveled, eyes alight with a new idea, and sweep me into a conversation about ancient civilizations, quantum physics, or the philosophy of art, his mind a dazzling labyrinth I delighted in exploring. Then, just as easily, he'd shed the intellectual for the sensual. He'd guide my hand over the rough bark of a centuries-old oak in his sprawling garden, teaching me to feel its history, or insist on cooking dinner himself. His strong hands surprisingly deft as they chopped herbs or kneaded dough. The kitchen filled with the aroma of spices and his low, melodic humming. He introduced me to his world gradually, letting me set the pace, yet always nudging me forward, deeper into his orbit. We walked for hours, exploring hidden paths in the woods surrounding his estate, his hand warm and firm in mine. We spent evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, our voices weaving together until the words blurred into a shared consciousness. He learned my preferences, my fears, my dreams, simply by observing, by listening, by feeling. And I, in turn, began to peel back the layers of his carefully constructed reserve, finding a deep well of passion, a surprising vulnerability, and an unwavering loyalty beneath the formidable exterior. The romantic tension between us was a constant shimmering thing, a silken thread pulled taut, threatening to snap at any moment. Every lingering glance, every accidental brush of hands, every shared laugh was charged with an unspoken promise. He never rushed, never pushed, yet his desire was palpable, a silent hum in the air around us. It was in the way his eyes would darken when I wore a particularly soft sweater, in the way his breath would catch when I leaned in to whisper something in his ear. It was in the way he'd simply look at me, a gaze so intense it felt like a touch, stripping away all defenses, leaving me bare and craving. One evening, after a particularly stimulating debate about the nature of free will, we found ourselves back in his study, the embers in the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather and burning wood, and the quiet hum of our shared presence. I was seated on the plush rug before the fire, he in a worn armchair, a half-empty glass of amber liquid cradled in his hand. The conversation had dwindled to comfortable silence, but the current between us crackled. He set his glass down, the soft clink echoing in the stillness. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice low, raw. "More beautiful than any sunset, any masterpiece." My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned to face him fully, my knees drawn up, my gaze locked with his. The blue of his eyes was an ocean, pulling me under. He rose slowly, moving with deliberate grace, and knelt before me, mirroring my position. His large hands cupped my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. His touch was electric, a promise and a plea. "I want you," he breathed, the words heavy with a desire that mirrored my own. "More than I've wanted anything in a lifetime." "Silas," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I want you too." The confession, so long held captive, felt like a release. A slow, triumphant smile curved his lips, but his eyes were filled with a tenderness that brought tears to mine. "Then let me show you," he murmured, and his mouth descended, not in a hungry rush, but with a deliberate, exquisite slowness. His lips were soft at first, a gentle exploration, a testing of the waters. Then, as I responded, parting my lips in invitation, he deepened the kiss, a passionate surrender that stole my breath. It was a kiss that tasted of longing, of patience, of promises kept, and futures unfolding. His hands moved from my face to the nape of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the angle, to possess me utterly. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. He pulled back just slightly, his forehead resting against mine, his breath ragged. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice a husky whisper, his eyes searching mine for any doubt. "Yes," I breathed, my answer firm, unwavering. More than sure. With a soft groan, he swept me into his arms. I wrapped my legs around his waist, my body molding to his, a perfect fit. He carried me from the study, up the grand staircase, and into his bedroom, the room bathed in moonlight that streamed through the tall windows. The heavy curtains were drawn back, revealing a sky dusted with a million stars, silent witnesses to our unfolding story. He laid me gently on the vast, silk-draped bed, his eyes never leaving mine. The air was cool against my skin, but his gaze was a consuming fire. He began to unbutton my blouse, his fingers brushing against my skin, sending delicious shivers through me. Each button was a revelation, a slow unveiling, until the fabric parted, revealing the lace of my camisole beneath. His eyes lingered, appreciative, worshipping. "So beautiful," he whispered again, his voice thick with adoration. He leaned down, pressing soft kisses to my collarbone, the hollow of my throat, the swell of my breast above the lace. Each kiss was a brand, a claim, a promise. My fingers, trembling with anticipation, went to his shirt, fumbling with the buttons. He paused, a low chuckle rumbling in his chest, and helped me, guiding my hands, until the shirt was open, revealing the sculpted expanse of his chest, dusted with dark hair. I reached out, my fingertips tracing the warm skin, feeling the tautness of muscle, the steady rhythm of his heart beneath my touch. He shivered, a visceral response that electrified me. We shed our remaining clothes slowly, reverently, our eyes locked, our hands exploring, learning the landscape of each other's bodies. The moonlight painted us in shades of silver and shadow, turning the ordinary into the ethereal. When finally we lay naked together, skin to skin, the contact was exquisite. His body was warm, strong, perfectly contoured to mine. He held me close, his arm around my waist, his leg tangled with mine, our breaths mingling, our hearts beating a synchronized rhythm. There was no rush, only a profound sense of rightness, of destiny fulfilled. He kissed me again, deeper this time, his tongue seeking mine, a dance of passion and surrender. His hand smoothed over my hip, tracing the curve of my waist, then moving lower, teasing, exploring, igniting a fire that spread through every fiber of my being. My own hands found purchase in his hair, pulling him closer, demanding more. When he finally moved over me, his weight a welcome press, his eyes were still on mine, full of reverence and raw desire. "Are you ready, my love?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. "More than ready," I breathed, my body arching to meet his. He entered me slowly, deliberately, a powerful, tender invasion that stole my breath and brought a gasp to my lips. It was a joining that felt ancient, inevitable, a perfect completion. A wave of sensation washed over me, a pleasure so profound it brought tears to my eyes. We moved together, a primal dance, our bodies finding a rhythm that was uniquely ours, building steadily, inexorably, towards a shattering crescendo. With each thrust, each groan, each whispered endearment, we became more entwined, our separate selves dissolving into a singular, passionate entity. The moonlight poured over us, illuminating our intertwined limbs, our flushed skin, our rapturous expressions. The world outside the bedroom ceased to exist. There was only Silas, and me, and the overwhelming, beautiful storm we created together. The climax, when it came, was a volcanic eruption, a cascade of pure, unadulterated sensation that echoed through every nerve ending, leaving me breathless and trembling in his arms. He cried out my name, his body shuddering with release, and collapsed against me, burying his face in my neck, his breath hot against my skin. We lay there for a long time, the echoes of our passion slowly fading, replaced by a profound sense of peace and belonging. His weight was comforting, his embrace a sanctuary. My fingers stroked the damp hair at his nape, and I felt the steady beat of his heart against my breast. Eventually he stirred, lifting his head to look at me, his eyes soft, contented, and full of an overwhelming love. He kissed my forehead, then my nose, then my lips, a series of gentle, lingering touches. "You are everything," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Everything I never knew I was missing. I smiled, a deep, soul-satisfying smile. And you, Silas Blackwood, I whispered back, pressing a kiss to his strong jaw, are everything I've always dreamed of, and so much more. The day, pregnant with possibility, had delivered on its promise, and then some. The journey with Silas had indeed only just begun. But with our bodies intertwined, our souls irrevocably linked, I knew that every thrilling, dangerous, and profoundly beautiful moment that lay ahead would be faced together. And as I drifted off to sleep in his arms, beneath the silent, watchful stars, I knew I was finally home.